Good morning to everyone who's joining us today for this session on the language show. I've just started the session a little bit early, so it gives time people to join and hopefully get yourself comfortable with a cup of tea or coffee or water, whatever you wish to have, and get yourself settled ready for this 45-minute session on It Ain't What You Do, It's the Way That You Do It. Please introduce yourselves in the chat because it's always great to see who's joining us today and also who where you're actually joining from, what languages you teach, and what key stage if you're teaching in the UK or whereabouts in the world you're teaching. It's always great to see the participants who are joining the session. So I've just started the session a little bit early. We're bang on 10 o'clock now. I'll just wait for 2 or 3 minutes for people just to join. So we've got quite a lot of people who have bookmarked this session. So I'm aware that it's Saturday morning and other people have got commitments. So you may find that you want to watch this or are planning on watching this again, or maybe watching it recorded either tomorrow or later in the week, or you've got quite a long time, I think, if you've bought a ticket for the language show to be able to do that. Yeah. Okay. So we've got someone who's raised a hand. Hi from Barcelona. Hello. Please join in the chat and let us know where you are joining us from today. It's always great to see where people are from. And we will start the session in just a couple of minutes, letting people join and get themselves comfortable. So we'll run it one more time. Hello, got Donovan and Chris and also Obi from London, Apama from India. Welcome to the session today. And Sam, Ati, welcome, teaching Indonesian. Windsor from London. Got a lot of people from down south here. Hugs and hot chocolate, please, from Belgium. Yes, please. It's a great event, I agree. And it's so cheap as well to be able to get so much CPD and access to so many good sessions. Having watched a few from yesterday, some of the sessions were absolutely amazing, and I'm sure they will be today and also tomorrow. I'm from Lincolnshire, that's not far from my neck of the woods. I'm up in North Yorkshire today. From Basingstoke, sunny. Yeah, it's sunny here today as well, up near where I live, up in North Yorkshire. Very nice weather. Hopefully it'll stay like this. Okay, we've just got shy of just over 30 people joined us, so we'll give it another minute or so. Sarah from the Lowry Academy in Manchester. I think I know that academy. I don't know it very well, but I've heard of it. Okay. Yep, that's great. Okay, so we're going to start the session in about 30 seconds. So I will share my screen. Welcome to everyone who's joined us. Please put any comments in the chat or any Q&A. I'll hopefully be able to have a little bit of time to share this at the end. Yeah, there we go. I'll share the screen. Okay. So I've called this session today Ain't What You Do, It's the Way That You Do It, because it's basically there's lots of stuff that's gone on over the past 30 years in teaching. Lots of different specifications have come and gone, lots of different types of teaching and learning. And basically, everything is really similar. It's just sometimes the way that you do it that you can make a difference to the students in your classroom. So this morning, we're going to have a look at building pupil confidence and assessing them in a supportive environment, helping them to learn and commit language to memory, and also how to teach the new GCSE alongside what's now called the legacy GCSE in England and Wales. There's a little bit about myself. I taught in the classroom for 33 years, 99 terms altogether, before I came out of the classroom full time. And I now work with a company called Language Nut as their Director of Education. I work with them part-time now, having just finished working with a very high performing multi-academy trust in the north of England. So this session really is based on my weekly schedule of learning and what I do with my students, because I still go into the classroom one day a week and teach. So it's very much a personal experience that I'm sharing with you today. I use the Newton's Cradle last year in my talk on teaching children who spit and chuck chairs, having taught in inner city Leeds, sorry, for quite a long time. And I found that it would be useful to have this, because it's almost like for today's session, the child is in the middle and is being bashed from both sides by knowledge and learning, or you could be in the middle and you're being bashed by all sorts of accountability from either side. So it's basically about trying to raise your head above the pulpit, really, because we're also intent on getting results, that we often forget about the journey and we forget to enjoy ourselves along the way. So I've built the session around these 5 things. Although I've separated them for organisation, the delivery, everything supports each other, and lots of these bullet points do interleave with others. Okay. So being creative, the way you can be creative in the classroom, I've done all sorts of things. I've used, students have made little trees like this with words on to help them to remember things. And we've maybe put little straws in a jar and they've pulled one out and tried to translate it at the beginning of a lesson. I also am creative by using glasses and lots of props in my lessons when we're doing questioning and answering. We've done all sorts of things with balloons, where the pupils have blown up balloons and strung them together and put words on them, particularly in the run up to the exam. We've made balancing clowns and butterflies. And again, that's been very popular to help pupils who are a little bit disaffected to be able to practice language and go around the classroom with these actually on their fingers and talk to each other and say words that are on the back of them. We've made houses and done little kind of discussions and little descriptions. We've done caramba with lollipop sticks, and I'll unpack that a little bit later on in the session. We've made key rings that are bespoke to children with lots of different words in that they've taken home and learned. We've even done pebble writing for pupils who've been a little bit more, just want a little bit more outdoor things to do. I've washed T-shirts many weeks on consecutive weeks where pupils have written words and translations and role plays and lots of things on them, and then practice them in class and wore them for a day if it was allowed by your senior leadership team. I've used lots of different things with concept bands where the pupils have written words on them and just help them to learn. So orange might be nouns, yellow might be adjectives, blue might be verbs. We've made masks and done lots of things with those. So there's an awful lot of stuff that I've done that's creative. Some of these you may have seen before in a session I've done. But certainly by being creative, it's about keeping variety. I've used lots of different clothes to dress up and get the students to take part in a role play and pretend to be someone else. Costumes and wigs. I've used tablecloths whereby pupils have written on them and I've taken them home and washed them in an effort to not be too unenvironmentally friendly. I've covered desks with ones that you can throw away. I try not to do that these days because it's just trying to recycle them as much as possible. We've had boxes, and particularly boys have enjoyed getting all sorts of different boxes and covering them in different white paper or different coloured paper, and they've written on them. If you have reluctant pupils who don't like writing on a box has helped to keep them and involved in the lesson. We all use mini whiteboards, I'm sure, and there's hundreds of different ways that you can use them. You can use them with drawing a shape on the board. So get your pupils to draw a triangle and they have to draw a picture in the middle of the triangle and write around the side of it. Use lots of different shapes. Sometimes I've put a line down the middle of the board and the pupils have had to write the target language on one side and draw a picture on the other. They've held them up. I've given them a minute to do it and we've given points for the best and most creative pictures. With bodies, we've done a picture here where I got a long roll of backing paper. Pupils have done in 3 groups of 3. One has laid on the floor. They've drawn around it and they've done words or any vocab. For example, any verbs that you associate with the mind or the head, thinking, saying, any verbs that you associate with your arms, raising, touching, anything like that. A pupil, one of my pupils a couple of years ago was absolutely creative with art and decided to draw lots of pictures and label them and things, and that helped her to remember them. Lots of things with mirrors, so being able to say the word into the mirror. So I invested in a class set of mirrors. Pupils would be able to look at the mirror and be able to watch themselves saying the word. Karaoke, again, is a great way of doing it, where you might have a long microphone on a long cable and be able to take that into your classroom, and the pupils can actually speak the word and the whole class will hear it. Caramba is a game which we will look at in a minute. It's just a load of lollipop sticks, and basically you write the word in, here it's in French, and then on the other side in English, and you put them in a pot, and you have them in groups of 3 or 4, and pupils take a word out, and if they can say the word that's on the other side of the stick, they say it, whatever it is, check it. If it's right, they keep the stick and they have another go, and so on. If it's wrong, they put the stick back in the pot, and it goes to the next person in the group. If they pull out the word that says caramba on it, they have to put all the sticks back in the pot, and then they start again. The stick word match, again, is great, particularly if you've got these in bundles. You can just put a piece of string around them or elastic band, and you can just push them out to the students, and they can just match them up as a quick filler activity if you are if they actually finish the work that they're doing quick. Being creative with assessment, so making a bingo card, using vocab and phrases from the lesson. I'll take those in, I'll check them, and then I'll redistribute them for the next lesson as a starter. And it just allows your pupils then to do something in the last 5 minutes of the lesson, which brings together the learning that they've had during that lesson. And then it's a starter, a nice sort of flow to the next lesson. They can make a noughts and crosses game to play with a partner in the target language. They might prepare a mind map to show what they've learned in the lesson, and that way you can start the next lesson with that, and they have to explain it to their person on their desk or who they're working with, or they might even write a short paragraph, again in the target language or English, for their partners to translate at the start of the next lesson. One thing I've done a lot of in my time as a teacher is I've recorded a dialogue in the classroom with pupils, and then we've used it with another class as an assessment. They've used it in different ways. They've had to try and guess who the pupil is if they know the students in the other class, or they've just had to sort of try and kind of like identify what's being said. They've had to, maybe if you've done it as a recording or on a visual thing, they've had to maybe talk about how the pupils are speaking in terms of their pronunciation, or even how they are using their body language and things like that. And that's where I've varied the success criteria in terms of judging the actual performance that's been on the tape. Till roll writing is something that as a child I used to spend a lot of time with my brother. My parents owned a business, and sometimes my brother didn't like to do his homework, so we would take the till out of the roll out of the till, and we would put it across the floor, and he would write on it. And it was quite a thin piece of roll, but he really enjoyed doing that. And it was something that I did with a lot of my pupils when I first started teaching, because it was just something a little bit novel for them to do. And I've carried on doing that. Haven't done that in the probably the last maybe 3 years, but it was something that when I was preparing this session came to mind that I'd done. Snake writing, again, you can see an example on the right hand side. If you've got pupils who don't like to write a lot, what I've done is I've got them to draw a snake on it, and so they've got to fill the gaps with where that is. So in other words, they're writing a slightly smaller thing, a reasonable size part of a sentence, and then smaller, and then obviously it's just giving them that kind of like psychological feeling that they're not writing across the entire page. And some pupils do enjoy that. They find that quite engaging. If I have a class where I've got some, again, pupils who don't like to write a lot, I might go around and draw a line on the page and say, I want you to get to that amount of work with this particular bullet point that you're working on, or this particular activity. And it's just, it engages them then, because they feel that they've just got that particular section of the paper to fill. Rainbow writing, I've had a lot of pupils who've enjoyed writing in different colours, and they've just enjoyed that, and it's allowed them to keep them focused on what they're doing. And then a phonics driving test is something that I developed many years ago, and it's where I would tear pages out of old dictionaries, and once we'd been learning phonics for a little while, because I never taught phonics where I would just teach it at the beginning and then forget about it. I always make sure it's an ongoing thing, and so I would regularly test the pupils' ability to be able to say words that they had never seen. Okay, and they would get certificates to say that they were at a particular level on their journey of learning in their phonics driving test. So now moving on to how to build confidence to speak in the target language. Speaking in the target language in the classroom has been in and out of fashion for as long as I can remember. And it's basically depends on what you prefer in your school. It's obviously great to do the modelling of I do, we do, and you do. Some schools have that as their mantra now, and they have it as something that they have to do in terms of their lessons. I do it, we do it as a class, and then you do it individually or in pairs. I often get pupils to speculate and have a guess at what they think it could be. Don't reassure them that they're not expected to get it right. And I'll say, right, call out the answer. Just what do you think it might be? Or what do you think you've got? What have you got there? And we value all answers there, not just one or two of the pupils that are going to get it right all the time. I have displays around the room of my target language, and it's a case of how do you present them? I don't just present them in blocks of like A4. I have them in bubble writing, or I might get some really nice bubbles or cut them out, or have pictures alongside them, so that the pupils are not just looking at stock words all the time. They're using kind of like, they're seeing different types of writing, and it helps to promote their speaking of the target language in the classroom. I reward attempts at when pupils use the target language, or when they attempt to do something that is a little bit different to what they've done, and I keep it as a routine. And again, going back to the mirrors, we often use the mirrors with students to I have a set of mirrors, and I usually use them quite a lot, and I would allow the pupils to look at themselves in the mirror to see that they are actually speaking the target language and watch what their mouth does. Racing against the timer, I might say, right, we've got some phrases up on the board, put your stopwatch on. I want you to see how many phrases you can say in a particular time limit. And they record how many they can say, and they just make a list of it and see how they're progressing over time. This is something that I would use as the start of a lesson, which is where maybe I would have, sorry about that, I would have a stock phrase, a stock kind of like little discussion conversation, and the pupils would have that at the beginning of the lesson, and I would vary that as the year goes on in terms of being able to change the different questions and revisit questions as well. And then obviously, if you are planning on doing the Pearson, or you've seen the Edexcel new GCSE, you'll know that they will have produced a list of words, a list of boys and girls, and names for use of boys and girls that they can actually use in the exam. And I would give every child in the class a name, and so that they would get used to the ones that are going to be coming across in the exam. Obviously, getting your phonics right is really important, because I think there are lots of different schemes out there, and if you get your phonics right in the first start, then you're going to be able to point out any word that you see. You're going to be able to speak the word and get it right. You can point out the sounds as you learn them. Avoiding unlearning bad habits is something that I've done, and then highlight any previously learned phonics, so that they can then understand them as you move forward with new vocabulary. I often have a column in the vocab book or the knowledge organizer for people to be able to write out the word as they say it, so the phonetic transcript. Obviously, that can help some students, and I've even had pupils go into the speaking exam with that in front of them, which nobody would understand except them, but it's how to actually say the word. Now, AQA are not allowing this any pupils to make any notes on their read aloud activity, but I know that Edexcel are. So again, that might affect your choice of board when you move forward, as to know whether your students can annotate the actual read aloud that they'll have to do in the exam. Choral repetition is really important, again, for getting the speaking right, and the way that the sounds go, and having linking sounds to gestures is again something that pupils can value if that's the way that they learn. And research has shown that explicit if I say that word correctly, sorry, phonological practice benefits all learners, especially if you've got SND pupils. I've done a phonics freeze where I've allocated a sound to a child and got them to give me a word which contains that sound, and they've made a picture, and we've put the sounds around the classroom like you would do in a child's nursery, and we can then use that constantly as a teaching tool. For primary, I might have put the sound on the door, maybe 3 sounds, and when they've gone in, they've had to touch the correct sound in terms of the one that they've heard in the lesson, or the one that they that they think they may be struggling with, so that we can have a look at that. Silent letter bingo would play in the same way as any normal bingo would, where you would have get the students to write down 4 words, and you would from a list of words, and you would then say a word, and if it contained that letter, that sound, they would tick it off, and obviously the first one to get a full card would win. Many times I've had phonics mats on the table, or just like you would have a vocabulary mat, just to give the pupils that little bit of confidence with being able to participate in a lesson if they come across a word that they don't know. And one of the things when I was working previously with a trust, we used a lot from Language Nut, and Language Nut have got quite a lot of their sounds. You could on their website, they have a complete phonics section, as do Ensel and any other many other different websites that you can visit, and MFL platforms. This is just a screenshot of some of the ones that I've used in the past with Language Nut, and the way I've used the one at the top is it's a penguin, and I've got the pupils to point left or right depending upon which one they think it is that they've heard. And then the bottom one, I've just recently done a class with year 7 where we've actually made a proper game, and we've actually been the avocados themselves, and pupils had a great time with that. They really enjoyed it. Okay, so this activity is something which I've done with lots of different classes, and it's very easy to do. You can basically make a mask, a famous person, or draw a person on a paper plate, put a piece of sellotape or blue tack on the back with a pencil or a lollipop stick, and they hold it up in front of their face. They could actually have words on the back which they're reading, or they can just have when they're doing a read aloud, they might want to have the read aloud there, and they've got on the back, and they're reading it aloud. You can make a short video of this. Pupils can speak behind the mask, and then you could use that for proof of progression. You could link it to a QR code, or you could do a short role play. And I found that this is absolutely vital for students who do not like to speak. And it does build confidence. I remember doing this many years ago in a very challenging inner city school, and it works a treat. Okay, and you can see an example of some of the masks and some of their paper plates that I've made. Very simple. So we'll move on to the third one, which is listening in a supportive manner. You could get your pupils to listen for a word, just one word, in the actual listening that you're doing with them, whether it's you reading aloud or whether it's a listening that you're doing. You could ask them to speculate in pairs. What words might you be hearing on this topic? And they work together, and they try and work it together as they're doing the listening. They could do a listening bingo, which is the pupils write a sentence. You might have been doing lots of different sentences if you use sentence builders or substitution tables or knowledge organizers. So they write a sentence, and the teacher says the sentence, chooses a sentence and says it. And as the pupils hear the sentence, if they've got any part of that sentence or any of the words, they can then tick it off. And if they get a complete sentence, then they win. The running dictation is a little bit like the running translation, where you have a text, 2 or 3 texts around the room, the same text, and you put your pupils in pairs or in threes, and they have to run to the text, give them 30 seconds there, get as much into their head as they can, and they go back and they dictate the text back to their partner, and they have to write it down. And then after 30 seconds, they switch over and the other person goes, and they take turns. If you work it in threes, you could have one person who is the actual monitor that nothing is said in English as you do it. Crazy dictation is where you read a piece of the target language at normal speed, and the pupils note down any words. That they understand. They then pair up with somebody else, and they see if they've got the common words, and then you read the text again, but you then vary how you read it. You might go very fast, you might go very slow, you might go medium, and then they try and take down as much as they can, and then they compare the notes again, and then they try and on a third reading, and as we know, those of us that are looking at the new GCSE, AQA are doing 2 lots of repetition in the listening, and Edexcel are doing 3 lots. So again, that might be a reason why you choose to do, might be one of the deal breakers for whichever specification you decide to do. But on this particular crazy dictation, they hear it 3 times, and on the 3rd time, they then write down as much as they can, and then together they construct what they've heard, and then they go and they try and barter with another couple. Have you got this? we'll have that, we'll give you this, and they swap. And then they go and they put the actual text together, and it could be used as a read aloud or maybe a translation. Listen and draw, again, is very straightforward. They listen to the text and they draw a picture from what they hear, or any sentences that they hear, and they draw a picture. Again, you could give the sentences or pictures in the correct order, and they listen to the text and they have to put the sentences, they could be the exact sentences, or they could be a different reroute of the sentences, you know, a slightly different wording of them, or it could be in English, or it could just be pictures that they have to put in the correct order. One thing I find pupils really like is that they mime, and they mime when they're with their eyes closed. So they listen to the text, they listen to the audio, and they mime what they hear. And then that's quite fun to do that. And they can then write a quick summary in English afterwards so that you can see that they've understood it. And then they tell their partner or someone on their team, or go walk around the room telling someone, and they then have to mime it, and then they write down what they think they've heard in the target language. 1 from 3 is you might have 3 pictures or 3 tenses or 3 adjectives, and the pupils listen and they have to decide which one it is from the 3. Okay, these are some ways in which I've used them with LanguageNote. I found that when we use some of them on, this is just one example of a type of website you might want to use, varying the different ways to assess, using true or false, using target language questions, using gap fill, or using multiple choice. Committing the language to memory then is very similar to recall and retrieval. So the two kind of go hand in hand, and I've just got my eye on the chat. I've got quite a lot of things in the chat. If any Q&As, please pop those in as well. Just got my eye on the time. So basically, when you're doing committing language to memory, I found that using lots of different ways, using digital resources, but I always find that, call me old-fashioned if you like, but I always think if the technology went out of the window tomorrow, or we lost technology for the day, what would we do? And I always think that teaching languages is about getting on with people, and it's about being able to interact with students. So I've always managed to think, right, how else can I do it without just using digital technology? So I've always tried to stick with 3 rows of 3, because that way you can exploit that to use it with noughts and crosses, or tic-tac-toe, whatever you call it. But it's always been on my mind that pupils have managed to remember 9 quite easily. We've had a couple of things that I've done in the past to get my pupils to learn things. I might have put cards around school, and I've set them a homework, haven't told them where the cards are for the words, but they've got to find the words and come back to me. And whoever gets 4 out of 9 or 5 out of 9 will get a prize, or will get points, whatever it is your school do. I have a lot of my vocabulary on the teaching wall, and I use my walls a great deal. I know it's difficult in some schools because some schools don't like you to do that. And we've had, I know I've read incidences, and people have told me where they've not had anything at the front. They're not allowed to have anything to distract the pupils. But I've seen pupils in an exam look up to the left or look up to the right, and I've thought, that's where the verbs are, and I can remember in my classroom. And that's actually helped them to do a lot of their writing in an exam, if they've been able to recall that where it is in the classroom. The on the gate quiz is something that we've done quite a lot of. If you have on a morning when you're meeting the pupils, or on a night when they're going home, but preferably in a morning, you might have get your SLT or whoever out there greeting the children, give them some packs of language cards, and they just are kind of like saying, how do you say this in French? How do you say this in German? What's this in Spanish? And you give them points, or they get kind of like rewards for the ones that they do. And it's just keeping that revision and keeping that retrieval ongoing. Lots of different things with the things that you can read there. I won't go into detail about those, but there's so many different things you can use for retrieving and teaching vocabulary. One thing that I use is we use the pyramid there, which is where came from an idea that I did many years ago of a plenary pyramid, where you wrote down 3 things that you remember from the lesson. Well, say for example you're wanting to do a bit of recall with around the theme of holidays, then you start with one word, holidays. The second one, holidays, hotel. The third one, holidays, hotel, week. The fourth one, holidays, hotel, week, sunny. So in other words, you're repeating the words going down until you've got the bottom, and you've got a whole cascade then of different words just to give your students that opportunity to recall. And it's such a cheap thing to do for a starter or for a plenary. And if you have pupils in your classroom of different abilities, you can adapt that by making it shorter. You can say, I want you to do a 3-line pyramid, an 8-line pyramid, a 20-line pyramid, whatever. And it's great as well if you've got teachers who are off and you need to set them something fairly quickly. The ones on the right is, again, I might have done this in a classroom. I have lots of different slides on a PowerPoint, and I might say to them a projet, which means a plan, or matière, a subject, and the pupils have got to create a sentence with that in it, or they've got to write down as many words as they can associate with that in the target language. One thing that helps to keep vocabulary recall importantly, vitally motivating in students' heads is to give the rewards. So here you can see they start 100 chips for the vocabulary recall at the end, the start of a particular period of time, and they place bets on how many questions each quiz you do with them that they'll get right. And then afterwards they say how many do they think they've got right, so they place bets on that, and then they have to say double or nothing with that. Have I made a great effort on this? And then they work out the winnings. So it's just a little bit of fun to do that. Again, lots of different ways on the Language Nut website of being able to recall vocabulary across the different skills. Martini verbs. Now, this comes from a long time ago when I used to, those of you who are as old as me will be able to remember an actual advert that used to come anytime, any place, anywhere. It's a wonderful world. You can share that martini. And I called it the Martini verbs because Martini verbs are verbs that can be used with any topic, any theme, or any scenario. So they brainstorm the verbs and I teach them, and I'll show you in a minute the verbs that I use. And I use different ways of saying it: to the ceiling, to the floor, to the door. And we basically build our verb repertoire in our heads. How I do this is I might have the pupils have these very simple ones. This is one that I would use for maybe a foundation level pupil. This is one I would use maybe for a higher level pupil. And if I forget to say this again, any of the resources that you see here today, you can have if you just email me. I'm more than happy to share them with you. Okay. And then committing language to memory as well. A lot of my pupils have had these, and they might come pre-populated for some who struggle, or I might get them to handwrite if they wish, or they just make their own copies so that they then have their own examples of connectives, their own examples of adjectives, and I try and get them to use these as many different ones as possible rather than revisit and using the same vocabulary time and time again. And I've found that this has helped with improving on results for GCSE and A-level pupils. Again, we're just about to launch our new exam resources for French GCSE with Language Nut. You can see here we have all of the legacy and the new specification vocabulary on there for actual revision. One thing I've also done is to try and encourage students to know 3 of everything. So all of these topics are on the current GCSE, and some of them I've brought in from the new GCSE. If the pupils can recall 3 of these, then the chances are whatever they come across in the exam for the writing and speaking, they will be able to manage and be able to deal with it. And again, for these, it's great for using for pupils who don't have a teacher, because you might have some kind of absence in your school. And again, committing language to memory is dead straightforward here. In Language Nut, you can do this. You can set bespoke different numbers of vocabulary to get your students to learn and revisit. So recall and retrieval, we've talked about quizzing, low stakes assessment, never talk about a test, never talk about an assessment. I never do that with students. I always give them a quiz. Mini whiteboards we've talked about, and Karamba we've also talked about. Stopwatches is great. If I say to them, right, here's a list of 15 words. I want you to tell me what they are in target language or in English. Here's a stopwatch, see how quickly you can do it. And we've then recorded that in a table in their book to see week 1, they've done it in 30 seconds. Then we've revisited week 1, maybe in week 6, they've done it in 29 seconds. And we can see a progression there going on. Okay. At A-level, I get the pupils to tell me what vocabulary they want to learn because I don't know where their gaps are. And you would hope that when they get to A-level or advanced level, Scottish Higher or whatever level you're teaching, they will know and they will be more motivated to learn the vocab that's important to them. We've talked about 3 of each, of knowing 3 of each of different topics. The recall triangle I've talked about before, and fortnightly quizzing is something that I've done. Every 2 weeks, I've given my pupils a listening, a reading, or a writing. The listening and reading I've done really straightforwardly because the pupils have been able to, it might only be 2 questions, but they've been able to swap and mark them. Or if you do them on a platform like Language Note, it's instantly marked. With the writing, I'll just give them 1 bullet point or 2 bullet points, and they will just have a 20-minute slot to write as much as they can. For the pupils that need it, I've given them maybe some vocabulary that they might want to include. That has allowed me to not have to be constantly marking books and be able to see the progress that my pupils are making, as well as being able to look at proper exam questions. This is a screenshot of a couple of learning journeys. Again, some students find these really useful. I sometimes would use this at the beginning of the PowerPoint and at the end, and I would then ask pupils to revisit me. Tell me something that you like and dislike. Tell me a description of a personality. So it's again me going over and backwards and forwards over vocabulary. And again, in week 7, I might drop in one of the learning journeys that they've had for the first half term. So that I would then be making sure I'm mixing it up a little bit so that pupils can see. Pupils actually like these kind of things because they can see where they've come from, where they're going, and what's in between. This is another example of one from higher up, from year 8. And again, I think I've put some examples a little bit further on, but it does trigger those kind of things trigger. And those of you I've seen on Facebook recently have wanted to know how to set the learning in context. This helps with that as well. Okay. Another thing that I've done is the vocab crunch, and again you can use this for read aloud and it helps with dictation. These are very straightforward. We have these, I've got these for French, Spanish and German, and you can take them home. They can I think on the next slide you can see here how to use them. They can even take them home and get someone to help them at home who doesn't even speak the language. It just helps committing the language to memory. Supporting students, these are great. If you make they make a bookmark, you might pre-make them. They might make their own. They might make one and swap it. It helps students to be able to just commit language to memory, and it helps them to recycle it and keep it going. And pupils have always got a book somewhere to stick one of these in and look at it. And I've seen students who've been in detention take these out and read them. They found them quite just something to focus their mind on. And let's face it, with lingual languages, the more often they see things, the more it'll start to stick. Another thing that if we've done is they might have a badge with some vocabulary on it, or they might wear a badge around their neck if they have the badges that you wear, and we've stuck a word on it, or that you might have some made if you can afford it, or make them yourselves, or get students to do it in a language club, and they swap badges so that they're seeing different vocabulary all the time. I've had them swapping it in assemblies, I've had them swapping it in tutor time, they've swapped it out in lunchtime, all sorts of things, and it makes just a little bit of fun. This again is an example of the learning journey, but again, some pupils find these really useful, that they can see the secure understanding, the amber and the red if they need to help, and any help with it. On Language Note, you can see here some examples of how we can track how our pupils work. But with Recall, with Language Note, you can search for a previous assignment. So if I've set an assignment, I will search for it, and then I would edit it. So I might change it a little bit, and then I can edit the students and the end date. So I could make it a really long assignment so that my pupils can revisit it. And then the students get a notification and they tick it. And if you tick that on the box, and they can redo the assignment or the vocab quiz as often as you can. And it makes such a great, easy thing to do for recalling vocabulary from previously in the course or previously the following year. When I get my year 10, I set them two whole years worth of work so that I know I keep a close track in my scheme of work what they did in week 7 of term 3, for example. If there is a week 7 in term 3, I doubt there would be. Well, there probably would be, actually. And I would say to them, I want you to go and I want you to revisit this. Okay, nearly at the end. So those of you that don't know, England's getting a new GCSE. Lots of difference between the two, but the main ones are here, okay, that I've just listed. And in terms of the read aloud, Do you give them time to practice? Can they annotate? One board does what another board doesn't. The role plays for are transactional for one board and they're not for another. And the photo cards, again, are coloured for one board and not for another. And the grammar section appears in the foundation for one board and the writing, but not for another. And the listening, as we've spoken about already. So in the very last couple of minutes of the session, before I check the questions, I make read aloud now part of every lesson I do. I use the text or the transcript from a listening. I prepare the ground for it as I would a listening, and I briefly describe the theme, what words might be asked or said, and then I might display the words on the board and ask what they think it might be about if I decide not to describe the theme. I might put the words in the wrong order and get the pupils to maybe work in pairs to tell me whether they think it needs to be which order they could come in. I might even preview the text and predict what might cause some issues using a visualizer or something like that. And again, last couple of bullet points. But I think it's really good for me to let the pupils hear me make mistakes when I'm actually reading, so that they can hear me making the mistakes. How do I trip up and how do I correct myself? You can model your own thoughts, as you can, as I said earlier, using a visualizer. You could stop at the points to explain your thinking and say, right, how do we say this word? In that case, pupils are now starting to predict what kind of sounds they might struggle with. And then you might read the text and stop and ask how to say the next word, using markers on the text to support intonation. One board does that, another board will not allow you to do that. I might give two versions of the sound, which one is it? And they decide, they close their eyes and they put the hand up left or put the hand up right as to which one they think is the correct version. And then obviously I'm sure all of us have used tongue twisters. Some pupils who struggle with reading might find following it with a finger or a ruler is acceptable. And I've seen pupils do that when they're reading, and they might try and do that in the read aloud. Shining a light on a word is quite fun as well. So you do a text and you call out a word. It might be an antonym, or it could be a synonym, or it could be a colour, and they have to shine a light with a little torch or their phone. They quite enjoy that. The reading frames are the red and green ones here that I've made from acetates from previously using OHP transparencies. And I've made those kind of like sometimes with different colours, because pupils get a little bit stressed when they're reading a long text, particularly at A level, and being able to show them a slightly narrowed down version of the read aloud might help with some students. We talked about the mirrors. Sometimes instead of mirrors, they might put on special read aloud glasses just to bear fun that they're doing a read aloud. A phone timer again works well, or if they're allowed phones in class, or a timer to be able to say how long is it taking you to read the text, sorry. And again, with the phonics caramba, it's very much similar to the phonics vocabulary, where you just have the sound on one side and the word on the other. And then the very last slide is I always build up confidence when I'm dealing with dictation, build up from short words to short phrases. I might do a running dictation in the same way that I talked about it earlier. And again, different ways of using it there. I might even just get them to scan the text and point out any new words. What words might they be struggling with, and how can we help them to fix that problem? And then maybe just listen for prepositions and articles as they're writing them down. And that, I think, is the very last slide. My address is elaine@languagenut.com, or you can find me on Twitter @Elaine Gelder. I'm also a member of ALL, and you can get by scanning the QR code, you can pick up a discount, I believe, on membership. So I will just check the chat now just to see if we've got any questions that I can answer. I'll try and put this up. Yeah, I'm just language. I like that idea. Vocaroo, somebody's mentioned that. You can get a link or a QR code. A great adult thing. Reading aloud as a method of assessment, practicing. Flipgrid, somebody's mentioned there. Dictogloss, yeah, that's another way of calling my dictation, I think. Teaching while on posters, yeah. Martini verbs, I got a big nice martini there. Extensive reading, as many words as they can, different colours, yeah, maybe 3 at a time. Great stuff. So instead of learning 3, they write it down. Yeah, GCSE is General Certificate of Education. Thank you, Darren, for flagging that up. jam-packed with ideas. Thank you so much, and have fun next session. Like I said to you before, and I'll say it again, if anybody wants any of the recording at all, I'm going to stop sharing now. If anybody wants any of the resources, please email me. I'm more than happy to send that out. Any questions or any other comments? Yeah, that's great. Exhausting and yeah, I often try and put as many. I know research is important, don't get me wrong, and everybody is, but I think, right, you can do the research. I'll come up with the kind of activities that the research is based on. So you know, I'm more than happy to take that on board, and it can be a little bit. Some of my sessions can be a bit quick with that, but like I say, if you want any resources or you want to chat about anything at all, just email me. That's so much that I would love to give you. Which exam board do I use? I use both, actually. I use both. And in one school, we're running both exam boards. We're running Pearson and we're running AQA to see which is the best results. We're going to make that decision now and give ourselves a little bit of a, I don't know, a little bit of a trial, a little bit of research, just, and who knows what the exams are going to come back at. We'll just see. Hello, Martin, I remember you well. We'll see what happens in terms of the results, and our the head at the school's agreed to give that a possible chance, and you know, we'll take a hit on the results if they're not great with one. But yeah, so lovely. Nice to see such positive feedback as well, and hope you enjoy good value for Language Note. Yeah, I guess it is. If you push them, if you tell them that you've attended today's session or contact me, we'll sure we can do the best deal we can for you, if you want to do that. But I'm not saying Language Note is the be all and end all. What I'm saying is, it's a tool that I have used to get results up in my last job, and I use it now with students regularly. But yeah, great to see everybody enjoying, and have a brilliant session. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And I'm going to end the recording in 30 seconds. Bye to everyone. No questions have come through, I don't think. Everybody's quite happy with, yeah, no open questions. Great. Fantastic. Lovely. Hope to see you all some stage soon. Bye.